The bonny pet laddie, the canny pet laddie, the bonny pet laddie for me, oh.
Hiya, this is Geordie Fraser's. Now, in our previous little video, we had a look at the origins of the Geordie and the links to Anglo-Saxon and the Angles in particular. We looked at the similarities with Frisian, and we also looked at the place names and that kind of thing. What we're going to do in this one, we're going to have a look at the possible influence, if any, from the Vikings and the French, the Normans, the Norsemen and the Normans, basically. We'll also have a look at some more place names and that kind of thing. Thank you for listening. Now, unfortunately, the golden age of Northumbria, as it was known, was brought to an end by the Norsemen, of course, in 793 AD. It all started with a raid upon Lindisfarne. Now, in those days, Lindisfarne was a great centre of pilgrimage. They were the sort of the tourists of the day, and the monks were warned that they were going to be paid a visit by the Norsemen. Well, they weren't at all worried because I thought it was a group of male nurses from Newcastle General Hospital. That isn't true. In fact, they didn't know the Norsemen, the Vikings, were coming. It was completely unexpected. It shocked Northumbria. It shocked Europe, in fact. Alcuin, who was the great scholar of Northumbria, now working for Charlemagne in France, as it now is, in the land of the Franks. He said it was punishment for the wickedness of what was going on in Northumbria. Northumbria was starting to degenerate, and civil war in the region started to develop and that kind of thing. And it really did weaken the kingdom, and it eventually resulted in the full-scale invasion of the Vikings, who really settled mostly in Yorkshire. That's where the massive settlement fell from around 867 AD, 866 was when the big invasion came, and then they gradually carved up the southern part of Northumbria, Yorkshire as it became, and the River Tees became a sort of a region of dialect split. Now, it's probably stretching the point to say that the Yorkshire dialect is a Viking dialect, but certainly if you look at the place names, a lot of Danish influence, all these Ormsbys and Thornaby and Maltby and Weatherby, all those names ending in BY, Viking, Danish origin. There are some elements of the Yorkshire dialect which have their roots in Viking. For example, the definite article t road, or just dropping it all together, is the clipping. That clipping of the is supposed to be Viking in origin. They say nay for no, which again is thought to be Viking, perhaps in root. Even the phrase tyke, which is the nickname for a Yorkshireman, actually means a snarling dog. It's actually a Viking word that meant originally snarling dog. I'm not sure why Yorkshiremen would be compared to snarling dogs. I don't know, but that's what apparently it means. So the Tees became the area of the split.
Becks and burns.
One interesting thing is streams. In Yorkshire, in South Durham, in Cumbria as well, which was a major area of Viking settlement, this is a Viking word for a stream, beck, whereas in North Durham, we use the word burn, as we do in Tyneside and in Northumberland. So you've got that interesting contrast again in the dialect and the place names, which shows again how the two subjects are closely related.
Viking words in English.
Now, we mentioned earlier on lots of nuts and bolts words, man, child, brother, sister, etc., being Anglo-Saxon. Now, the Vikings also introduced words into our language that are used, that are familiar to anybody who speaks English, like freckle. I don't have so many now, but when I was little, I had lots of freckles. Freckle is a Viking word. Leg, I have two of those. Leg, it's a Viking word. Skull, I have one of those, fortunately. That's also a Viking word. Meek, rotten, clasp, crawl, dazzle, take, scream, lift, trust, thrust, husband and sky. They're all Viking words. So the Vikings had a massive influence on English. So it's not surprising that they had influence on dialects as well, even in areas perhaps where there wasn't major areas of Viking, which weren't major areas of Viking settlement, such as the northeast. So we've got to be careful in assuming that if we use a dialect word in the northeast that may appear to be Scandinavian, in assuming that means that the northeast was a major area of Viking settlement.
Skeets, bait and marra. Surprisingly, some coal mining terms in the northeast dialect may have Old Norse origins, such as kist for a chest, though there is a similar word in Anglo-Saxon. Skeets, the wooden rails on which pit cages ran, is an Old Norse word too, possibly related to skates. Bait, the term for the miner's lunchtime snack, is also Old Norse, as possibly is mara, a miner's workmate or friend, maybe from an Old Norse word meaning friendly. This term is also used in Cumbria. One possible explanation for these Viking words in the coalfield is that they were perhaps imported from Viking-settled Cumbria, where copper mining was important from relatively early times, and it's just across the Pennines. Old Dutch words also possibly appear in the coalfield, terms such as hunkers for sitting on your haunches, or corve for a coal basket, and possibly keek, meaning to peep, though this word is also perhaps Old Norse in origin. Shirts and skirts.
Now, those Vikings had a massive influence on English, on the Anglo-Saxon language. In fact, they wiped out about 85% of Anglo-Saxon words, and often they supplemented existing ones as well. I've mentioned husband and sky and that kind of thing already, so these are words that the Vikings introduced, replacing earlier Anglo-Saxon words. But they also, we sometimes get little variations. For example, the word shirt and the word skirt. Shirt is Anglo-Saxon. It means a garment, but it's come to specifically mean an upper garment, usually worn by man. But the Viking variation on that word, which shows how all these Germanic and Scandinavian languages are interrelated, was skirt, which means a lower garment, usually worn by women. So you've got shirt and skirt, two very interesting and closely related words. And you get this in place names as well. The river Skern near Darlington, which probably means the bright stream, was probably originally Shern in the Anglo-Saxon, as was Mask by the sea, was probably originally the marsh. The Anglo-Saxon word marsh, mask. It's just a Viking influence on an English word, so they actually often changed existing English words as well. We've got interrelated words like worm and orm for dragons and wyverns and sea monsters and all that kind of thing. Orm is a Viking word. Worm is probably an earlier Germanic word. So you've got which are all, both major parts of Viking and Anglo-Saxon mythology. So you've got these interesting words that are interrelated, and obviously worms, as they're called on Tyneside. Wish lads had your gobs, tell you all an awful story. That's actually Wearside, isn't it? Actually, the song is from Tyneside. It was a Tyneside musical hall song about a Wearside worm, but that's a different story anyway. Wish lads had your gobs, I'll tell you all an awful story. Wish lads had your gobs, I'll tell you about the worm. Yeah, it's got to be warm. You've got to say warm, not worm. Warm. Another interesting Geordie pronunciation.
The Normans. Parlez-vous Geordie?
So we've mentioned the Vikings. What about the Normans? The Normans were Vikings too. So the Normans, Norman actually means Norseman. The Vikings settled in northern France and were given the name Norman. They assimilated with the French. They dominated the northern part of France, and they gave the name to Normandy. And then, of course, 1066, they invaded Britain, and they completely turned our country's history upside down. They were just as ruthless as their Viking ancestors in their conquest and raiding. Well, in their conquest of Britain. Of course, they didn't have a massive influence on our place names, but in the northeast, particularly in County Durham, you get this le, this le element, which was created probably by the Norman prince bishops. And it really helped to distinguish places with similar sounding names for the purposes of taxation and for documentation and that kind of thing. So you get Hettonley Hall and Hortonley Spring and Hettonley Hill, which isn't so well known, and Hortonley Skern near Darlington, all within the realm of the Prince Bishop of Durham. And then you've got Chesterley Street to distinguish it from other places called Chester. And and even Hartlepool, which is the one that people don't often realise, to distinguish it from the neighbouring village of Hart. So there's a French influence on our place names. But what about our dialect? Well, your grandfather, he liked his black bullets. Your grandad, he liked his black bullets. Bullet is a French word for that particular sweet. Incidentally, ket. You sometimes hear sweets called kets. That's a Viking word. And it originally meant rubbish. Ugh, rubbish, yeah. Sweetmeats, something you cast off, something you didn't really want. Probably a way of parents discouraging their kids from eating them. Oh, that's ket. Ket, just in the singular, actually, but a ket became kets for sweets. So that's an interesting aside. Chaldron, you know the Chaldron wagons at Beamish Museum that used to transport the coal? Chaldron is another French word. Ashet, which is a midden. It's another word used in the northeast. And bonny. The bonny pit laddie, the canny pit laddie, the bonny pit laddie for me, oh. He sits on his hunkers and yaks at the bunkers and brings the white sillet to me, oh. He comes... Anyway, never mind. Bonny, it's a French word, obviously, used in Scotland as well. The French, of course, they changed our English language altogether, just in the way the Vikings did in the earlier period. Anything that's terrible, possible, that kind of thing. It has French origins, and you get words such as like question. In French it's question. Well, question is actually Norman French. That's why we have that word, and it's slightly different to the French. But they had a massive influence on our language. Really profound influence. But maybe not quite so much on the dialect.
Au revoir, bonny lad. Auf Wiedersehen, pet. Aye, that was canny. I wonder what the next one's about.